And we're on. Good day. I am Tamara Scott. Thank you for joining us one more day, Tamara Scott Live, Truth for Our Time, as we help you live God's Word in today's world, and we give you actual truth you can use when the headlines hit home. So thanks for staying with me. I've been out on the road traveling the state of Iowa. Family Research Council, the Family Leader, and National Organization of Marriage have sponsored a bus that has toured several cities in Iowa, still touring today and tomorrow that I had to step off so I could be with you, and some other activities happening here today and regain my responsibilities as in other areas. The bus went through several locations, several cities, and I happen to be on the eastern side of the state. Many consider the eastern side of the state the left side of the state, but I have to tell you, I think that's a misguided notion. In some of those areas, some of those counties that are noted to be what we call liberal counties, some of those Republicans or conservatives, as you would say, are the strongest in their convictions anywhere in the state. It's odd to me how you can go into an area which may be considered a conservative area of the state, and those people are conservative for the most part, but when you get into the party lines, your ardent, solid people who can defend what they believe in are often in these difficult counties where they are the minority. So don't disregard the east side of the state. If you talk values, if you talk issues, if you talk solutions, most of them are with us. Most of them are looking for conservative ideas. Most of them support life. Most of them want marriage honored. It's their union work that they often feel like they have to be beholden to. It's the union vote that forces them to vote another way. And so if we can talk to them, some of them are peeling off when they see some of these issues that are not so helpful. When they see Obamacare coming through and you really couldn't keep your doctor, and your insurance actually goes up when the government's in charge of it. It's not like we didn't warn you about that before. And they see other areas happening, issues of concern. America is now probably less respected than it's ever been around the world. And we have this administration to thank for that. We have Afghanistan, we have Iraq, areas where our men and women have given their blood to secure and are now being squandered after we've paid the price to help secure them. It's got to be heartbreaking to military families. And speaking of military families, right here in America, not being honored with the promises and the benefits and the protections that they should have as a veteran. So these are issues very, very near and dear to our hearts, and you need to be searching them out. You need to be talking to the candidates about them. You need to be very careful about what's happening, and you need to be engaged in this election. And so I appreciate the tour that we were able to do with Family Research Council, Family Leader, and National Organization of Marriage. Talking to me now is another good organization starting right here in Iowa, Informed Choices, offering choices to women who are in need when they find out they're pregnant and it might have been unplanned. Rachel Owens, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Tamara. It's such a pleasure.
And so, Informed Choices, how many clinics do you have in Iowa?
So right now we have a clinic in Iowa City, and we have a clinic in Ames. Our heart is to really reach out to the abortion vulnerable, and those happen to be college students. So 50% of abortions in the state of Iowa are performed on college, 18 to 24-year-old college students. And so we're in Iowa City, where there's over 3,000 abortions a year in Iowa City, and then we're in Ames on the university campus there. And we're opening a clinic in Fort Dodge, which is also very close to the community college campus up there in that area. And up in Webster County, there's a huge need. They have a really high teen pregnancy rate and STD rate.
So thank you.
We're also up in there.
Thank you for being a missionary and going right into the field where you're most needed. You've got a very interesting week coming up next week. You have how many banquets?
We have 5 banquets coming up.
And give us the locations quickly of where those banquets will be as far as towns.
You bet. We're going to be in Burlington on the 20th, October 20th, and Gail Williams is going to be there doing her incredible presentation on life, and she's going to be at all those banquets. And then we're going to be on the 21st, we're going to be in Iowa City doing a banquet there. On the 23rd, we're going to be in Ames. The 24th, we're going to be in Des Moines, and the 25th, we're going to be in Fort Dodge.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Gail Williams, for those of you who don't know, you can look her up online. A mother who was told she would lose her sight with every birth she gave, and still she chose life over her sight. And what a testimony she has. Delightful to listen to. Interesting, humorous, and just you will be uplifted and encouraged and challenged to live your life to the fullest when you come out. Plus, you're supporting a great organization with informed choices. Rachel, give us the phone number or a website where people can go for more information.
Yeah, our phone number is 319-337-0575, and our website is informedchoiceia.org, and that's informedchoiceia as in Iowa.org.
Okay.
And when you go there, you can register. It's going to be a wonderful evening, just of enlightenment and encouragement in your walk, your pro-life walk.
Well, I applaud you for taking on 5 different banquets in 5 different locations. That is a service in itself to the people of Iowa, not having to travel to one location as we often do for these organizations. So Burlington, Iowa City, Ames, Des Moines, and Fort Dodge. If you're near one of those locations, you can travel, support informed choices. You'll hear Gail Williams, who is a delightful speaker who will encourage you and challenge you to live life to the fullest. And you will be supporting informed choices, these clinics that go into the college communities and offer these young girls help in their time of unrest and insecurity. And I hate to call it crisis, because in my mind, even though we may not be going with God's plan, there is no unplanned pregnancy.
There isn't. Another thing that we're going to be doing with this tour, Tamara, is we're bringing in a mobile unit that's going to be with us, and it's actually going to be the mobile unit that we're going to have in Des Moines. And this mobile medical unit will be parked out in front of the abortion clinics, and we'll ask these girls, these sidewalk counselors will ask them if they would like to see their baby before they have that abortion. And 90% of women who see their baby, have their needs met, choose life. And so this is really our heart and our mission, is to show these women that there is life, and it is precious.
What a great opportunity for those of you who are listening to join in. And maybe you can't make the banquet, but you'd like to give toward this, because seeing a life inside the womb often changes what the deciding factor in having life outside that womb. So 319-337-0575. I thank Rachel Owens for joining us on this portion of the program. When we come back, we're going to go to a message for our sponsors. We applaud Christians for America for being one of our sponsors. And we'll come back. We're going to join our American Family Radio Network. And joining me will be Brad McQueen. Brad has written the book, The Cult of Common Core. He'll be joining us, and we'll be talking with him about some of the things he learned on the review committee for one of the testing consortiums. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit, you're our hero!
Metro Ford's on everywhere. Metro Ford's on everywhere.
See 'em here, see 'em there. You got bad credit? We don't care.
Metro Ford's on everywhere. Metro Ford's on everywhere.
Visit emetroford.com for your guaranteed credit approval. Good credit, bad credit, no credit. Everybody drives with guaranteed credit approval at emetroford.com.
Metro Ford's on everywhere.
Visit emetroford.com today.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's Amco on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give Amco on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
And thanks for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. You are listening to Tamara Scott Live as we bring you truth for our time, help when the headlines hit home. We help you live God's Word in today's world. Mac, we want to thank Mac and Webcast One Studios for powering us and allowing us to be on the air, sharing his air with me on American Family Radio. If you're listening on American Family Radio and you want to hear more of the program that we do on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. live, today we're doing it at 11 a.m. It's throwing everybody off. We had a studio tour of some new things that are happening here for Webcast One Live, but 10 a.m. Central Time is when we do the show live. You can always join in online, webcastonelive.com. But if you want to go back to the archives and listen to any interview in full or hear more of the interview that you might be missing on American Family Radio, then you can go to Tamara Scott Live on YouTube and you'll hear the show in the entirety. Today joining me is Brad McQueen. Brad has written a book. I'm going to show it for those of you who are watching online. It's just a simple book. Look how thin that is. Very thin. Brad wrote this book, The Cult of Common Core. And what I like about it, Brad is a teacher, and it's not written in the heady academic format that is drawn out and often boring and difficult and just very dry. This is written very conversationally. It's written from, I would say, almost a parent to parent, a neighbor to neighbor type conversational, but boy, the information is really well done. So Brad McQueen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
You are very welcome. What prompted you to write this book?
Exactly what you said. When I first was exposed, and we'll go into it later, but when I was first exposed to the true sort of motives, the true end game for Common Core, I started looking around for that book that I could just get a foundation in what Common Core was and if there's any movements against it. And I couldn't find that simple book because every time I read an article that was written against the Common Core, for the Common Core, I just kind of got lost in all the acronyms and the and the verbiage, and I would just stop. And eventually I just had to do all the research. I'm a bit on the lazy side, so I wanted to present it to me, obviously. But eventually I did all the research. I wrote the book that I was looking for to get a basic foundation in Common Core, and so that I could understand the article, so I could have informed conversations, and also it's if I could talk to the parents in my classroom about Common Core, this is the book I would hand to them, or this would be the conversation I'd have if I had a couple hours with them to talk to them. Not using all the verbiage that confused me, and there is some of the acronyms, but it can be quite the rabbit hole going down, following all the different organizations and the weird tentacles and connections, and with all the different organizations comprising what I just call Common Core. You can get lost in the conversation. So the book is in response to that. So I could have everything I learned, I could just have it in one place, and then anyone who wanted to read it could read it.
And so, for those of you listening, if you've not heard about Common Core, I would recommend this book. It is an easy read, and as Brad says, he's broken it down for you. There are so many tenets of Common Core. It's hard for me to even discuss it when I go into presentations under 30 minutes, to be honest with you. But it's done about as best possible here, and as Brad said, he breaks down the acronyms. He also breaks down some of the money trails that come in with Bill Gates. Pages 80 to 86 of the book are a list of organizations, groups that have received grants from Bill Gates, who is heavily behind the Common Core, pushing it. And as you say, Brad, because what he sees is a $9 billion, billion with the B, $1 billion market. He wants data so that he can best serve his consumers. He's looking at from a market-driven perspective when we're thinking this is an educational program, and we're thinking how kind of him to be so philanthropic. But this is nothing more than a marketing tool for him, would you say?
Yeah, and I think it's in that list of grantees from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that I list in the back of my book. That's only 1 year. But it gets all the major players that kept popping up all the time. Because when I did research on Common Core, you kind of see the same names pop up everywhere. And like you said, Bill Gates was everywhere. Anytime anyone needed money for anything related to Common Core, Bill Gates opened up his fanny pack and handed out $1 million bills. And like you said as well, he's very interested in education, or actually in other kids' education. He's very interested in the rest of the country's kids conforming to this Common Core, dumbed-down standards, and everything else for various reasons. But his own kids are in private school safely away from Common Core. There's kind of this mentality with governors as well that, Republican governors and others that are for Common Core, or at least not strongly against it. They have their kids in private school. It's almost like there's this two-tier system of education. There's this one group of elitist progressives that want in both the Republican and Democrat Party and in Bill Gates' party, whatever that is. They're training their kids to hand, they can hand the reins over of being an elitist, being a shepherd, that's the path they're taking, whereas the rest of the kids in the country with this Common Core are being trained to be the sheep. So there's this two-tiered education system going on in our country. And then there is that component of Bill Gates looks at our kids as products. They should be like on an assembly line of computers. They should all have the same program. They should all have the same specifications at the end. They should all be common, so that data can be easily transferred about them, easily, laterally, horizontally, up and down, anywhere. He sees our kids more as products, and he sees that big K through 12 market, not only to sell them educational data and technology, but to cull information, because there's a big data suctioning, NSA-like data suctioning component to Common Core that businesses or private businesses are now being given access to, where they haven't had that access before, where they can do their product development using our kids in the K through 12 system. There's also another component that I hear a lot about, that the chambers of commerces and Bill Gates as well are interested in creating sort of a human resources in our K through 12 system. So our K through 12 system to them is designed to create workers that fit their specifications, not the traditional sense of educating our kids, which says, let's create kids that are grounded in the exceptionalism of our country's history, grounded in classical thought, independence of thought, true critical thinking, so that they can go and take any job. They can have any job. Why tailor them to one job? That I call it why have the chambers of commerce iron lung mentality. With that mentality that the chambers of commerce have during the polio epidemic, they would have been demanding our kids in K through 12 be groomed to be iron lung maintainers and improvers rather than producing kids that go on to defeat polio with a vaccine. So it's a very complicated, blurred web with any part of Common Core, and Bill Gates is right in the middle of all that.
Absolutely, and I thank you for bringing it out so clearly, succinctly, when you say 20 million to at least 75 different groups to aid in the implementation of Common Core. 9 billion student market he salivates over. In 2013 alone, he directed $20 million to 75 different groups to force Common Core on the rest of us while his kids find something else. And I think it's in your book that you talk about, and you mentioned it here, his kids are being taught how to make decisions for our kids who are being taught how to be compliant with those decisions. It's very frightening. I want to talk also about the dissenters. Because you mentioned, actually, let me go back to the NSA-like data suctioning you talked about, because U.S. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat, I think out of Maine, became so alarmed by the reports of the NSA-like data suctioning that he began to, the U.S. Department of Education, he addressed a letter to the Secretary of Education asking him to explain the rationale of these charges. And you talk about that. The FERPA changes. People think there's a protection for their privacy in the public schools. That is no longer. It has been undone in the execution, in the executive arm of government through regulations and the way they're not enforcing regulations anymore. And so you talk on page 30 about kids being asked to wear beepers that would go off at random times so they would be prompted to self-report their feelings or record what was causing them to feel frustrated.
Yeah, and that was a study produced with this data gathering in mind. First off, with the FERPA regulations, the specific changes that the education privacy laws, the FERPA laws, weren't changed. President Obama and Arne Duncan changed the regulation. Through executive order, they now don't have to tell parents when their kids' data has been used or accessed. And they also don't have to get their permission, where in the past you had to. In schools, the only people that had access to your kids' data were people who had a need-to-know status, the direct teacher and someone who's working close to them. Otherwise, you had to get the parents' permission. You have to get parent permission in most places to put your kids' artwork on their website. But nowadays, with Common Core and the changes with the data gathering and then the FERPA laws, you don't know when your kids' data is being gathered. And a bunch of field tests were just done with Smarter Balanced Common Core test and the PARC test, where that very thing happened. There were two private companies that went into the schools, and the schools pretended and they acted like they were just part of the testing regimen in our school system, whereas they actually culled a bunch of information from our kids. The kids took these Common Core tests. Now they're taking all that information, and over the summer they were tweaking their tests. The Common Core tests, which they will now sell back because they're private companies, to our states to use as their Common Core tests. Parents weren't asked for their permission for these private companies to come in and do that, and we still don't know what information was gathered from them because they aren't telling us. We don't know where it's kept. But yeah, the FERPA laws have definitely been changed greatly underneath the radar.
And I want to talk, too, the questions they're asking, the information they're seeking is no longer academic only in nature. It is very personal, sensitive information, and the way others have told me on this show, others I've interviewed, it is never expunged from the record. Even in a juvenile detention center, you can have a record expunged, but these will never go off the record. And if you're listening out there, you can just do a search. P20W, the letter P for preschool, 20 for 20 years of tracking, and W for workforce. This is a program designed to track your students in every area of their life, from preschool for 20 years into the workforce. It's quite alarming. And we're going to be talking too. I mean, government is just so intrusive at this point. Many people don't realize what liberties they're losing because they didn't know what liberties that we used to have protected. And so in my hand, if you're watching online, you're seeing a little comic book that was handed or sold to students who attended the the governor's LGBTQ conference here in Iowa last year. And it's called The Mighty Maxie. It's about a young lady. It's about bullying, but we know bullying programs don't work in schools. But it's talking about this journal that these kids fill out, the belief book. It's like a journal. We record our values or something and then turn it in at the end of the year. That's right here on the top of the page. That alone should alarm every parent out there. We turn in our values to the school. The school is now going to have what? They're going to evaluate our values. They're going to tell us what's politically correct, what's not. This is not what schools are supposed to be about, nor should our kids be in any way submissive, or our values taught at home submissive to the schools. The schools work for you. Teachers work for you. Brad, you're a teacher. I feel like we've gotten this out of balance, and maybe because you started teaching just in the last 10, 11 years, but aren't the schools supposed to be subject to parents? Are parents not still the authority over their children?
Well, and that's the problem is with Common Core. It's been a slow pull with the progressives in power. That's been their dream, is to pull education into their sphere of influence and to centralize it into Washington, D.C. They have more control over it, and they can, like you were saying, they will have control over the content in the classroom. That's the ultimate goal. Common Core has nothing to do with education, just like Obamacare has nothing to do with health care. EPA overreach into states has nothing to do with pollution. It has to do with control. And progressives have been wanting to get control of the education system and therefore control our children's minds for a long time. That's why the second part of my book, the subtitle is Obama's Final Solution for Your Child's Mind and Our Country's Exceptionalism. Because right now, Common Core covers math, reading, writing, the skill areas. But their true goal is to get into, I believe, the social studies, the histories, the sciences, where they can reimagine our country's greatness, our history. So in one generation, they can knock down our country to just an ordinary country, just like any other country in the world. If you have control over a country's history and our kids' vision of what our history and where we come from, you control a lot about our kids. And the parents are being pushed out of the equation. The parents, God gave kids to parents. God didn't give kids to bureaucracies in state capitals or the Department of Education with Arne Duncan and Barack Obama or whoever else the next progressive president becomes. And that's where we've gotten away from that local control. And that's where, you're right, schools are now being seen as this sort of family. The government is also being seen, I think, through progressive interventions in schools as sort of this parent figure as well. With these, a lot of the family structures have been broken down over the years, so that now kids are thirsting for authority figures that they trust. And I think that is part of their agenda, is to start teaching kids morality, to start teaching kids, implanting them the correct, quote unquote, view of the world, the view of family, the view of everything. Like the magazine you just quoted, or the comic book you just quoted, it's subtle at first, and it's stronger. Not only will does Common Core have the goal of going after the kids, it also it's a data suctioning system from preschool with TS Gold that's out there. It's in Iowa as well. It's in Arizona. It's an assessment system that suctions information from birth to kindergarten, and then Common Core has their tentacles in kindergarten through 12th grade and through career. So they will know not only an incredible amount of information about your kids and grandkids out there, but they'll know a lot about your families, because families and kids talk about their families all the time.
Right.
I know who at my school, I know the Second Amendment families. I know what kind of family structures are at home. Now, with what I'm seeing with TS Gold, which is a preschool Common Core type program, they're actually entering all that information and any anecdotal information that they hear, see, any work, any surveys that are going home can be introduced or put into this data suctioning system, and it stays there with your kid from preschool as they go up the ranks. So your kid grows up and say, for instance, they get through the whole school system and they're still thinking for themselves, they're still believing in American exceptionalism, they want to run for office and take back our country. Well, we have a government that not only has all their health information and psychological evaluations, if they had that done in school, they also have it with Obamacare. You don't think that an administration who finds you a threat isn't going to leak that information to knock you down?
Yeah, not only
IRS scandals and NSA.
There you go. Exactly. Not only are they going to leak it, but what will they use to hurt you, to come after you?
Yeah. If they don't take care of you beforehand, if they don't come, you'll be, with these data suctioning systems, the information, all the child's data is attached to the child themselves. There's nothing anonymous. In the past, schools gather data all the time. If they shared it out, higher up, they would usually be aggregate. They would aggregate the data, make it more anonymous. So they might get money from the federal government for special education, some sort of special education program. They would have to report back how many kids were helped by this program. Nowadays, it's the actual kid's name and everything attached to that kid is going to be in their data stream, this longitudinal data stream. It's like a river that runs from your kid all the way up to the Department of Education, and these little streams of data all along the way are being fed into your kid's data stream that fills and fills and fills, and your family information goes in there too. And that data stream can be tapped into any place, and you get the full picture of your kid. Now they've also changed it so that private companies can have access to that data stream. As long as they can show a tangential relationship to the kid's education, they can have research companies come in, technology companies, gaming companies, textbook companies can gather all your kids' information and use it for whatever purposes they are, and they don't have to tell you. They don't have to tell you, and they don't have to get their permission.
And so
your parents' permission. So I think it's a design with Common Core to separate the kids from their parents, almost like a predator separates. Like in the animal kingdom, a predator might separate the little baby from the herd so they can get it. It's very similar, and I think of Common Core as a child predator. There's no other way to. It's a child predator. So when I hear politicians, especially Republican politicians, who say, "Well, I'm against Common Core, but we still need college and career-ready standards," they basically want to have parts of it in place, not pull out the whole thing. I always want to ask them, well, what part of a child predator would you take off that's running around in your school? Shouldn't you take the whole predator out?
Wow. Brad McQueen is my guest. McQueen is the last name. The Cult of Common Core. You can find him on Facebook, The Cult of Common Core. You can find the book online. It's not expensive to buy, and it's certainly not time-consuming to read and very helpful. We're talking right now about the data sectioning that's happening in our schools right now. And here's part of the problem as well. Teachers are saying, well, this has been going on for a while. Yes, they have been warming up to this. This is true. But once Common Core is set in place, it will be very difficult for schools to move away from it when they lose that local control. And you will lose local control. Local compliance is not local control. When they come in with the Common Core, you will have a set of standards that will demand a specific curriculum. Now, whether you buy it from this company or that colored textbook won't matter. It will be teaching the same information that will apply to those standards or the test curriculum that they're going to ask for. So like Henry Ford said, it doesn't matter what color you want in your Model T as long as it's black. You're not going to have choices anymore. Brad, you mentioned the PS Gold. Is that P as in pre and S as in school, preschool gold?
T like in
T.
teaching. It stands for Teaching Strategies Gold.
There you go.
Iowa has it as well.
Teaching Strategies Gold, the word gold. Okay, so we need to learn more about that here in Iowa. And then we also want to talk, you mentioned the testing that went on this past year, and I believe Iowa was part of that. Parents are now opting out their students. You have the ability to opt your students out. Some are using the Hatch Amendment, some are using forums on various website pages. If you get on Stop Common Core Facebook pages, you'll find them for most any state, and someone can help you with the opt-out there. We have a Facebook page for Iowa, Stop Common Core, but they are for most states. Is that our music? Are we running out of time? We absolutely are. 35:25. We've got to be done by this half hour. Brad is a teacher, and so it's hard to talk with him because he's in the classroom. But Brad, will you come back with us another time and talk more about this?
Definitely.
So much good information in this book. I really encourage you to get a copy of it because you have no idea what's happening in your classroom and the control that's taken place over your children. And I like Brad's analogy about the predatory, separating the child from the herd. Many parents say, I could never homeschool because we wouldn't get along. Trust me, you'd get along so much better if you didn't have that outside influence tearing your baby away from your family. I am Tamara Scott. We've given you great information. I thank Christians for America for helping us make it possible to bring it to you. We'll be back with more. You can find us on Tamara Scott Live on YouTube. Get the archive. Be encouraged. Never be complacent.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs,
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're gonna make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
And Tamara Scott. Thank you for joining me. Tamara Scott Live, we bring you truth for our time, and we are so thankful to Webcast One and Mac for sharing his air with us on Restoring Hope. And Mac usually comes to you on personal level, individual levels of overcoming addiction and rehab and those life habits that need changing so you can have hope and real help in your life. I usually come at it from the national perspective, the civic perspective, what we do to restore hope in our communities so that we can have a better tomorrow. And joining me today is Michael Damastis. Michael is a pastor right here in Des Moines, in a south side of Des Moines. We used to call it the Fort Des Moines area. Fort Des Moines is an Army facility over there across the street from you that's still intact and used today. But his is a Church of Christ. And I can say this because I know you're not ashamed of it. You're not going to hide from it, and you're still going to tell the truth no matter what anybody else says.
Absolutely.
So Michael's come on today to talk about some of the issues. We were originally scheduled to talk about the movie, The Song.
Right. It's that's a great movie, by the way, and it's pretty much out of most theaters now, so it's something to be looking for on DVD and Blu-ray when it's released, and that'll probably be around Christmas time, I'm assuming.
And I never even heard of it in the theaters. Of course, I don't go to theaters because there's no windows; they're dark, and I like to be outdoors. And so, but tell us a little bit. Is that one of the movies that did so well or made a lot of money that Hollywood doesn't talk about?
Right. I think it did do well. Very small budget film, but it's put out by a studio called City on a Hill Productions.
Cool.
Fantastic movie that is a movie that will really enrich a couple's marriage if they go and see this film. It's a very Christian, biblically based film that promotes a great message about marriage.
The Song.
Yes.
What couple out there couldn't use a little enrichment? So what a great idea for us as we come into the holidays this fall. So thank you, Michael Damastis. And I also want to thank, before I forget, my sponsors, Christians for America. We thank you for coming alongside, helping us make sure that we can get this show out to people, get help to people, and thank Christians for America for what they do. Pastor Don Swarthout and Danny Van Gundy out of Ohio, giving rallies. I think he's having thousands attend. I mean, it sounds like a miniature of Billy Graham what's happening over there, and it's good to hear, and I'm pleased to hear about it. He's got quite a testimony himself about life-changing addictions and being delivered into a healthy lifestyle with Jesus Christ. So, Michael Damastis, we were going to talk about the song, but as we help people when the headlines hit home, the headlines hit yesterday. And how ironic. I was on a bus with Family Research Council, the family leader and National Organization for Marriage, traveling the state of Iowa. They will be traveling Kansas and Nebraska as well, urging voters, think it through, vote your values, and protect your liberties because they are at risk. We hear people say they're progressive. A progressive will usually mean more oppressive rules for us. We hear people talk about being liberal. When you vote in a liberal, you usually lose your liberties.
Right.
So, what happened in Houston?
There is an openly gay mayor of Houston currently, and her name is Annise. I forgot her name. Annise Parker, excuse me. But when she was elected into office, one of the things that she helped push through was a city ordinance in Houston that allows people that are quote-unquote gender confused to choose which restroom they would like to use based on their own preference, which means a 40-year-old man can go into a locker room in the YMCA for the girls and stand around and just watch young girls undress.
Time out. I talked about this in the studio 3 studios ago, back when I was on a small Catholic radio station in Little Des Moines, Iowa. We warned people about this then, and they laughed and they mocked us, said that will never happen. My concern at that point was just 6th grade boys going into a 2nd grade girls' bathroom, in an elementary school. And now you're saying it's even worse because it's a public area.
It is, and it's something that there were several churches in the city of Houston that rightly stood up and spoke very vehemently out against this ordinance that is just insanely ludicrous and wrong in every level. And since it has been passed and put into action, part of the enforcement measure of that now is that the mayor, Annise Parker, has subpoenaed 5 particular churches and these pastors who have spoken out against this city ordinance. And she wants to know in this subpoena the content of recent sermons, whether or not they have been addressing this city ordinance or whether or not they have been addressing her particularly as an individual. That's what she's trying to find out. And I believe these 5 churches and pastors are basically saying, stuff it, and no way. I know they are being represented by the ADF, the Alliance Defense Fund, and they are trying to put a kibosh to this unlawful, unconstitutional action by this out-of-control mayor in Houston.
Well, first off, does she have subpoena power?
I don't know, to be frank with you.
I've not heard of a mayor subpoenaing someone.
She's using, I think, the power of her office to make sure that happens.
An attorney can, a county attorney, a district attorney, or a judge. It has to come from a judge.
Right.
But I can't think that a mayor can subpoena some. I've just not heard of that before.
That part of it, the legalities of it, I don't know, to be frank.
And that's what this is not just thumping on the church if you don't like the church. Think this through. This is your liberties at stake. This is people overstepping their bounds, crossing over the lines of constitutional protections.
Well, I got into several discussions about this in social media and yesterday, and believe it or not, there are people that are applauding this and saying they think, well, you know what, good for that mayor. If churches are going to stand up and speak out, do political speech like they're not supposed to, they're supposed to just do their own little thing, then this is what's going to happen to them as a result. And my point was, and this is what I shared with the individuals that were lauding this insane thing, I just said, well, once the government deems our speech is not good, what are you going to do when they deem your speech not good?
And yes, and let's clarify, it is not unlawful for pastors to speak politically.
No, it's not. Absolutely, it's not. It's constitutionally guaranteed by the First Amendment that I can speak about what and when and who and whatever I want from my pulpit. It's protected speech. And I'm not, by the way, it wouldn't even matter if it wasn't. I follow what God says regardless.
You have a higher authority.
Absolutely.
And our founding fathers recognized that. The Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 different times, Supreme Being, the Almighty, under various titles, but we were as a nation in submission to God Almighty. Our founding fathers knew our principles must fall in line with nature's law and God's law.
Right.
Never is there a separation of church and state in our documents until this misnomer of a law in the late 50s and 60s, the Johnson Amendment.
Right.
And that's where this comes from, but it was never to curtail churches.
Absolutely. It was to keep the government out of churches is what it was to do. It was to keep the government from trying to regulate churches and their activities.
The Danbury Baptist letter, that's the Jefferson letter that they refer to in the court decisions about the penetration high wall separating church and state. That's to protect the churches from government. But the Johnson Amendment was late 50s, early 60s on a tax on the 501c3, C4, which is what government now uses, or those who want to oppress now use to silence the church.
Right. And it's something, by the way, that no church has ever faced a revoking of their 501c3 status ever in the history of the IRS. And our protections, by the way, predate the IRS establishing, a non-taxable entity anyways. That's been from the founding of our country. But I believe that, it's important for churches to fight this, but it's important for every citizen of the United States to understand, man, this is not just an attack, like you said, on churches. This is an attack on every person's liberty. This is brown shirt Nazi going after Dietrich Bonhoeffer kind of stuff.
This is an abuse of power, and she really ought to be recalled.
Oh, yeah. And in the quickest fashion possible.
And I don't know if Texas has recall. We don't have it here in Iowa. But the people of Texas, they brag about their independence. They brag about their liberties and how strong they are. Now is your time to let your star shine, and you better take care of this issue because this is a mayor run amok.
Absolutely.
And so the churches that are there, Obviously, 5 are under attack. And let me just tell you, this pastor isn't just speaking lightly. This pastor has been under attack himself when he put a sign on the front outside of his church that said being gay is not okay.
Yes, well, that was the title of a message that I preached and about the issue of homosexuality that came about. This was back in 2012, and when I put the title of that sermon on our church's marquee, it really kind of created a firestorm.
And Right Wing Watch loves to just tap in and just run a frenzy when we talk about this issue. We wouldn't be talking about it if others weren't attacking the church and attacking our liberties. And this is what Americans need to understand. It's not a tolerance. It's not live and let live. This is not about someone's sexuality. The whole movement behind this is attacking the liberties, undoing any liberties Americans have, and this is the one way they see an easy avenue into doing that.
Well, you know what's sad is, coming back to my own anecdotal experience, but our church marquee has been vandalized numerous times, and every time it's a vandalized or our church is threatened or attacked or whatever, we get bad messages or emails, it's because I've put a message about marriage on the sign. And that statement, and usually it's a statement like the current message on our sign says, marriage still is one man, one woman for life. And those kinds of messages are not allowed anymore in the public arena. And so they can't be tolerated. And so usually what happens is our sign gets spray painted or people will vandalize it in other various forms. And we've had to pay lots and lots of money to have things repaired. And now we have security cameras out there and all that kind of stuff, which I never thought we would have to have. But that's just the way that we have to handle things.
And beyond that, we talked about saying political messages. This is not a political message.
No.
God's design for marriage is a biblical message. It was biblical first. He designed marriage before he designed government, the church, or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not political. It is biblical first.
Right.
Politics is invading into our area.
Right.
So I'm going to challenge Joel Osteen. I don't know if he'll ever hear this little show, but Joel Osteen, his church is in Houston. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now is your time to stand, Joel. You either decide whether you're with the Word of God, whether you fall under his authority or the authority of this mayor. Now is the time. You cannot serve two masters.
Well, I will tell you, in relationship to this particular mayor and her office, I don't know if this is something that would be allowable or not, but I have her office's number and her office's email address. If people were interested and want to speak out, I think it's important that we do. The number for the mayor's office of Houston, Texas is 713-837-0311. And, sorry?
713-837-0311.
Yes, ma'am. And her email address for her office is the word scheduling at houstontx.gov.
And do we know, is she a Democrat or Republican?
She's a Democrat.
She's a Democrat. Not that all Republicans get this issue right as well.
Correct.
But often more times, the Democrats, well, when we saw it very clearly in their convention in 2012 when they had to finagle around 3 different votes to see if they could even let God back in the platform. So that said it very clearly. The ADF is defending these pastors. Mm-hmm. The ACLU should be as well. The
Agreed.
ACLU should jump in on this, absolutely. Now, I was with someone, and I'm so trying to figure out where I was sitting, who I was talking to. They had been asked for their sermon outline, and they gave it. And I scolded them at that point and said, you should have never done that. Pastors do not, should not, will not, if they understand their liberties, hand over their sermon notes. Why?
No way. I would never bow my knee to Baal in that manner. What we do is something that is a God-given right. It isn't something that's granted by the country. Although I do believe our Constitution also guarantees us that same privilege through the First Amendment. But I respect no authority in that manner. I'm going to preach what God's word says. Period. Even if it was unlawful to do so, I would still preach it. But it isn't unlawful, and nor do any of these pastors in Houston, Texas, need to share one word, one audio soundbite or anything from what they do in their worship gatherings when God's word is being proclaimed.
It is so unfortunate that the Constitution has not been taught in our public schools, our colleges, and even some of our law schools. So people don't understand what our liberties should be, how many we've lost, and what we're still losing. They also don't understand that everything that's made this country strong, they've been told, has been wrong.
Right.
Whether it's free trade, whether it's capitalism, whether it's entrepreneurship, whatever it is. Our Christian principles, certainly. So, Michael, I know myself, I know you. There is no hatred in your heart, but that's what we're going to be tagged with for even talking about this discussion.
Well, you know what's sad is, and this is something that somebody asked me yesterday, do you think that it is wrong to subpoena churches under any circumstance? Absolutely not. I think that sometimes, there might be probable cause for criminal activities or some kind of crime has occurred or some kind of thing that might have happened.
An embezzlement.
Exactly.
Sure.
Those things have happened in the past, and no, it's not wrong for a subpoena to occur. That's something when there's a criminal investigation occurring, but there's a whole different level of area when you're talking about what's the preacher preaching on. That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
And that's awful. That is not the government's place nor business. They have no right to ask such a question. And that's what's being done. Give me your sermons. We need to see because after sermons, then it's, hey, what are you posting on Facebook? Hey, what are you writing about in letters to people in your congregation? Hey, what are you, putting up on these websites? It's a ball that none of us want to start rolling down that hill. It's a very bad thing, and it will lead to very, very bad things in the future.
A church of the size of Joel Osteen's, I'm surprised we have a mayor that would have espoused such unbiblical views. I'm not talking about her sexuality. I really don't care what she does in her bedroom. That's her business. Right. Until she makes it my business.
Right.
Until she brings it into our churches and tries to thump her business with our Bible.
Right.
But that type of a person with this type of a mentality, this authoritarian, intrusive mentality, should have never been elected in a town with a church the size of Joel Osteen's. If we understood our call civically as a church, we have a call to be involved, to take our values into the voting booth.
The only comment I'll make on that is to say if we had more churches that were preaching God's word and not preaching how you can have a better life, how you can have a better workplace environment, how you can make more money, that probably would be a different thing.
2 Corinthians 3:17, I think. I could be wrong on that. Check me out. If I'm wrong, just do a search on this verse. Where the Holy Spirit is, there is liberty. If you want your most freedoms, your most liberty, then you'll have a godly attitude. This is why we espouse these views. This is why our founding fathers had sermons in the Capitol arena, gave sermons. This is why we understood the need to submit to a greater power. Otherwise, you have our human power. And when humans get themselves involved, it's my way. It's my humanity that gets involved. It's that the humanistic religion, and that's what we see here. Michael, other thoughts on this?
I just pray for those pastors and pray for what I believe is just the first step in a war that's going to continue to grow. I think that this is really a testing ground to see how people
Absolutely.
react. That's what I think this is.
And the pastor that I talked to a couple weeks ago, I'm trying to remember now who it was. I don't even think it was a pastor. I think it was a guest speaker. And so I'm going to try and remember who that was. That was probably a testing ground as well. Marriage. We have now the libertarian movement telling us they want government out of marriage. Well, I certainly want government out of the act of my marriage. But we understand why government is involved in marriage. And I heard politicians speaking yesterday, Sam Clovis, every time he speaks, he teaches. The man knows his Constitution like no other. He brings up Article 3, the power that we have over the courts, because they have maligned and misused their power, and we could so correct so many things that have happened across this nation. But he also explained the need to keep marriage, why government is concerned about marriage and promotes it. Government promotes, and the biblical separation of church and state that is there, government is to uphold good, punish the bad. That's all. Government promotes marriage because of the good it brings. The natural family as God designed it brings, as he said, economic freedom. to communities. It brings health to communities. We know when the family's healthy, society benefits. When the family's unhealthy, we pay the cost. And his point was, if you don't have marriage in on the front end, government in the marriage issue in the front end, then you'll have many more separations, divisions. It will be more heavily in the back end in those programs.
Right.
Which government shouldn't be in either.
Right.
So that's why we justify government having an interest in the family as God designed it.
Well, and it's people get angry at these statements, but the fact is it opens up the door for us to be able to determine marriage for any way that we want it. I mean, the next step is polygamy. The next step is, men and children and, whatever. It's marriage if it's just two people loving each other, and that's what we're going to define marriage as, which it's never been defined that way ever in any history or culture. If that's all it is, then really we're in trouble. And like you say, the government has a vested interest in protecting this institution, because our society is going to head down a very bad path if we don't. And those doors are already opening up. The discussions of pedophilia, the normalization of that activity is occurring all over in the media.
And they will jump on you and say, alarmist, that will never happen, just like they did me years ago on the bathroom issue. That is now what this governor or this mayor is protecting.
By the way, there is a court case of a man that I brought up. He's a 40-year-old man that went into a locker room in the YMCA to watch little girls ages 10 and 7 undressing and changing their clothes. And he did it under the protection of an ordinance of gender confusion and being able to walk in a restroom because he deemed himself, a female.
Was that this town?
I don't know if it was in Houston.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
Yeah,
if
it would be sincerely
town?
ironic. Yeah, but that's what this kind of stuff leads to. It leads to people being hurt because we can't figure out basic male-female stuff.
If what we're talking about is so out of line, if we're just being old-fashioned here and legalistic and pushing our way on others, then why did everybody get so mad at Tiger Woods when he cheated on his wife so many times?
Right.
Because there's a betrayal there. Because there's a loyalty that we expect from someone, and that unity that comes into a marriage is necessity in a healthy relationship. And if you have unhealthy relationships, you have an unhealthy community.
Right.
So we need to be on the phone. You've given us the phone number. 713-837-0311 is the mayor. Her name?
Anise Parker. That's Annise and Parker, Parker.
P as in?
Yeah, P as in Paul.
Anise Parker, Houston. And how can we be helping these pastors?
Praying for them, lifting them up. And, to be honest with you, I'm not sure which churches they are by name. I don't know. You could maybe try to contact the Alliance Defending Freedom and see if you could get through their channels a message to them or whatever. I'm sure that they're going to not want unwarranted criticism or attacks, so they're going to try to protect them. But I think it's important that we encourage them, especially by prayer and praying for these guys, lifting them up.
Galatians asks the question, have I become your enemy because I tell you the truth? And I would say the truth is not hateful unless you hate the truth. So I am Tamara Scott. I appreciate you joining me, Michael Damastis. If people want to contact you.
Yeah, our website is godsfort.org, godsfort.org. That's for our church, and you can listen to sermons online there, or you can even contact us through that medium to our church.
And I appreciate you, Michael Damastis, for being brave enough to tell the truth when it may not be popular, strong enough to stand when you know they're coming after you, and they did one Sunday a couple years ago because I came to support you during that time.
I know that, and I appreciate that
when
very
I
much.
think the cops were not even allowed to work at your church off duty.
Right.
Because of your stance.
Right.
That says a whole lot as well.
Yep.
Well, you've been challenged, and I hope you'll take the challenge. Don't take me for my word. Take it against God's word. Take His word on it. Test it with His word. And then do a little research. Look up polyamory. Polyamory, the science of having several relationships at the same time, and see if that's healthy, if that's really something we want for our kids. It's yours to take charge of. You can make a difference, and it's high time you do, because you're losing your liberties if you don't. I am Tamara Scott. Be encouraged and never be complacent.